What's up everybody, this is the 2023 Volkswagen GTI. So about the GTI, well for 2023 there's nothing new aside from a 40th anniversary edition, but this is my first time reviewing the Mk8 GTI and I still have to say that I think they look really nice. Obviously by this point you've probably already formed an opinion about the styling, but I think especially in this King's Red metallic it looks really sharp and just, I don't know, I really like how you have the illuminated little light bar there in the front of the grille and just overall, you know, the whole vehicle is about an inch longer on a 0.6 inch longer wheelbase, so a little more stretched out than the Mk7s, and just looks really nice out back there. I really like the sharp taillights, and so I don't know, it's just a classic look that just ages really well. And even though they were a little more daring with this generation for the design, I still think it really looks good, and even a few years later here has continued to age really well. The interior of the GTI is the same for 2023 as well, aside from the fact that it appears that they've run out of leather because this is an Autobahn trim that has these plaid cloth seats, and I'm not complaining because I love plaid. It's a classic thing here for the GTI, and I'm also a little partial to plaid if you can't tell. But you know, it's interesting. I looked at the window sticker and there's a credit for like $1,200 for the fact that instead of getting normally the Autobahn will have heated and ventilated leather seats. This one does not have the ventilation because they didn't design these plaid seats for that, so only the heated seats here, and also they're not fully power like the Autobahn seats usually are. But aside from that, yes, we have an Autobahn here with the plaid seats, which might be the perfect combo for some people that was previously unattainable. But you have the head-up display and all the other nice touches here of the Autobahn trims, and it's nice in here. I did a full interior review on a Golf R, and so I go into depth into that video, so I'll link that video at the end of this one if you want to hear all the details on the Mk8 you know, Golf interior here. But overall it's a very nice place to be. Yeah, a little cozy, but surprisingly, you know, it's a roomier backseat than you might be expecting. A good amount of cargo space and all that. The infotainment system is the big, you know, thorn that people are a little bit upset about still. I'm going to try it out again here this week. I didn't love it with my week with the Golf R, but I'm going to try it out here. Thankfully, it does have wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, so if you're just used to just doing the smartphone thing, you're not going to have to interact with the system very much, thankfully. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, there's a lot to like here in this interior still. I know some people complain about build quality not being as good as the Mk7 and the Mk7.5, but you know, at first glance here, I think it still is pretty nice overall, especially compared to most of the other things, you know, this competes with. But let's start up and go for a drive. The GTIs have this really nice key from Volkswagen. It's glossy and has some nice metal here on the sides. It's just like a very high-end key. There's exotic cars that have less impressive keys than this one. So a really nice key, honestly. And of course it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it turns right on. Alright, so setting off here in the 2023 GTI. So the first thing you probably notice about it is the excellent visibility. I mean, you know, they always do such a good job here with the Golfs of having, you know, a nice large windshield, tiny little A-pillars there, very easy to see around, very good view out of the back, and just very easy to drive. Obviously the compact dimensions, nice small vehicle. It's just so nice to drive these things regardless of whether you're in a wide open space or you're in a compact, you know, city area or something like that. But anyway, other things about the GTI, I don't know. Well, this one, again, being an Autobahn here, does have the dynamic chassis control, adaptive suspension system, so I have that in the comfort mode currently, and so far, I mean, it's really nice. Again, for a sporty vehicle, I'd say it's right in line, and certainly a little bit nicer than some others that sometimes have a little bit of a stiffer spring rate, especially the ones with fixed suspensions, like the new Civic Si and the new WRX, for example. And so this is certainly, I think, a cut above those as far as ride quality goes. Even just from the very get-go, you'll probably notice that. Other things here, thankfully, there hasn't really been much rev hang with this manual for the GTI. So this is the manual transmission version I'm in here. And rev hang is something that, you know, you do encounter in some other vehicles, even still these days, you know, it's something that's kind of plaguing a lot of modern manuals. But I haven't really noticed it too much here in this. We'll see as I do some sportier driving if that, you know, rears its ugly head or not. I also like the little growl you get from this engine, of course. These 2-liter turbo 4s always have a nice little growl to them, and you can also change that, and in sport mode you can make the sound a little louder, but there is no actual active exhaust going on or anything like you get with a Golf R, unfortunately. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the sport mode here, and then I'll firm everything up, make everything as sporty as it can possibly be, and let's turn that onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. All right. All right. Alright, so a good amount of power here, pulls really nice. basically we have the 2-liter turbo 4, does 241 horsepower, 273 pound-feet of torque, and a 0 to 60 for these with the DSG transmission, the dual clutch, it'll be a 5.1 second 0 to 60. And if you're worried about 0 to 60 times, save yourself the time and just go for the DSG. Don't even consider the manual. Obviously, it's just going to be faster with the DSG, and they do such a good job with the Volkswagen dual clutch there of, you know, being really snappy. And so also we have the voice command thing here, so I said the word Volkswagen and it came up with the voice command thing, another little minor annoyance in this infotainment system. But anyway, I mean, it's a really good amount of power. I mean, I wanted to spin the tires there. I'm gonna have to look around for a traction control off button because I don't see anything, and this, you know, interior, they got rid of most of the buttons here, so I'm gonna have to see if I can find a way to turn that off. But otherwise, in sport mode here, though, it is, you know, nice and responsive. It does, I mean, it's really punchy with the power, though, and that is one thing, you know, the numbers don't lie. Whenever you have way more horsepower than a, you know, Civic Si, way more horsepower, way more torque, even than like the WRX and stuff, I mean, it feels punchier than those. The WRX, you still got to wait around for the turbo to kind of build a little bit. With this, it's instant punch, you know, from very low RPMs, and just feels, you know, a good bit quicker than those do, especially from a dig, I think. Especially if you're unwilling to roast the clutch in the GTI, I think this is definitely going to be the punchiest one of the bunch. And you know, obviously the front wheel drive thing is going to slow you down a little bit because, again, it wanted to cut power there because of that. It also was telling me the clutch temperature was high, even though I have not been driving this car hard. I literally just have driven it like 5 miles slowly so far, aside from that first acceleration, so I'm not sure why it was giving me that warning message. Otherwise, you know, this road that I'm on here currently does generate some road noise typically, and you can hear a little bit here. I mean, again, it's a small car, it's pretty light, they don't have a ton of sound deadening in here, but it's pretty refined, I think, for what it is. And so anyway, we're coming up some corners here that I always take, and let's see how the handling is here in the GTI. So we are on the summer tires here because it's the Autobahn. So we have 235 wide Goodyear Eagle Super Sports on here, and so it feels pretty nice and flat. Honestly, it's just very undramatic, and it just kind of is a point and shoot thing. And certainly I can tell it definitely feels a nice bit lighter than the Golf R, and so a little just more tossable. But yeah, I mean, it is actually on rails. I know that term is really thrown out a lot, but this really actually just feels like it is on rails. It is so sharp, but so undramatic too. It does it so easily that, you know, it's just one of these vehicles, the limits have gotten so high on these that you can just really drive them so much faster than, you know, past generations, and just, you know, it just feels like it's doing it all without breaking a sweat. So it's one of these vehicles that really rewards you for pushing it harder and harder. It wants you to go faster and faster because it can handle it all day long. And you know, part of the reason is, you know, whenever you're putting the power down coming out of corners, you have the electronic limited slip differential, and so it's really great that you have that to manage that traction for you and put down the power in the best way possible. And we'll test that out a little bit more on some corner exits in a few minutes. I do kind of think that there are some other vehicles in this price category that do feel a little more dramatic as far as the handling goes, and, you know, if you're willing to pay a few grand more, you know, something like a Hyundai Elantra N, I think, feels a little more exciting as far as the handling. But this is so undramatic that it just instills a lot of confidence in you, and a lot of confidence in the car as well. And so it's just going to come down to personal preference, I think. But I really like the way that it drives, and I think it certainly feels a little lower and a little flatter than the WRX, and honestly, even than the Civic Si. Even though that feels, I think, a little bit lighter, a little bit simpler for the Civic Si. But you know, these only weigh, by the way, for even the DSG Autobahn, I think Car and Driver weighed it in at like 3,140 pounds or something. So I mean, you'd basically be at, you know, just barely over 3,100 pounds probably for the manual here. And it certainly feels very nice and light, and yet you still have all the nice luxury features. Now I have my heated steering wheel going, you got heated seats here. Usually you'd have cool seats as well, and, you know, all these other nice touches, all the screens and everything. But yet it's still a nice light vehicle, so it's really great that they were able to balance those two things. And I'm gonna do another acceleration here. All right, yeah, it struggles to put the power down, but it's fun. It does have some wheel spin, but I wish it would kind of play up the wheel spin a little more. You know, like the Elantra N, it really lets you have it and lets you just go nuts, and it's fun. It's more fun, I think, with this. It just seems like the wheel spin's an annoyance, and I don't want it to be an annoyance. I want it to be just, you know, a fun extra thing of excitement here. But also, that's a new little development. A little bit of a crackle and a pop out of the exhaust whenever you're around 3,000 RPMs here. Hit the gas and let off. and it does a little pop. I like that. Nothing crazy, but a little something I can appreciate. You know, better than just the boring nothing exhaust like the WRX and the Civic Si, unfortunately. But other things, so now, you know, in this sport mode, you know, this road has a few little bumps on it and stuff, but even in sport mode, the ride is pretty nice, and, you know, I think, again, you could totally daily drive this, no problem, and I'd say it certainly is much softer than the stiffest setting in the Elantra N, for sure, with its adaptive suspension. When you have that thing in its stiffest mode, I mean, it feels like a race car stiff kind of feel. This is certainly not that harsh or anything. And it's a really nice balance. Another thing, though, that I'm noticing, so this manual transmission, you know, Volkswagen transmissions all have this odd little quirk where they dip down if you put any kind of downward pressure on them whenever you're shifting. The whole shifter dips down a little bit. It's just a little weird, something you can definitely get used to. Not a big deal, just one little nitpicky thing that I always notice about these. It's kind of weird. But otherwise, the shifter feels good. You know, clutch is just nice and easy to use. Throttle response is really nice and sharp, especially here in sport mode. And it's just, yeah, it's impressive how punchy this thing feels. I mean, it's only 13 more horsepower and 15 more pound-feet of torque than the Mark 7s, but it feels punchier than that. This thing really feels quick. And honestly, I mean, you know, it's been about a year or so since I drove the Mark 8 Golf R, but this doesn't feel much slower than the Golf R. You know, the real payoff for that, I think, is getting the all-wheel drive, but I think for most people, the GTI is going to be plenty of fun still. Another thing that's nice, though, about this manual is that it does have a pretty nice, light flywheel, so whenever I'm, you know, rev matching my downshift, since it doesn't have auto rev match like the Civic Si does, for example, you know, it's not a big deal, though, because it's very easy to rev match. But we got some tight corners here coming up. I'm going to try and punch it out of this corner. Yeah, that diff. You can, I mean, it really does a good job putting that power down, because, I mean, you can feel like it's trying to claw a little bit, but it's not losing traction, really. And it just rockets this thing out of corners. There's another nice tight one. I'll go early on the gas, and it really fixes your early acceleration very, very well. You know, whenever you're punching it way too early coming out of a corner, it still works with you and really, you know, helps to pull you through that corner there. So really, really well done with that diff, and it really works wonders here in this car. It makes it feel a lot better than, especially the stuff that does not have front limited slip diff, like the Elantra N line. The Elantra N itself does have one, and that one is even more fun with its limited slip diff and the way that one works. That one you can really feel it working. This isn't quite as dramatic as the Elantra N in basically any way. Another acceleration here. Yeah, this thing, it still feels really good, even though it is, you know, spinning the tires there a little bit. It's really strong. I love the way this thing feels, and I love the way that it sounds too. Oh, there's a louder pop there that time. All right, I'm really digging the exhaust here, and yeah, but the nice little growl coming from the engine, and I think there's a little bit of, you know, augmentation here from the stereos as well. But it sounds good, and I'm digging the crackles and pops. Well done, Volkswagen. Merging onto the highway here, getting up some regular highway speeds. And I now have the adaptive cruise control system on, and so this does have the actual adaptive cruise control even with the manual transmission, which is great. Here in the Autobahn, it also gives you the travel assist function, so it gives you the kind of, you know, more advanced lane keeping assist system here. So far, it's doing a pretty good job. I will continue to test this during my week with this vehicle to see how the lane keep assist system works here in the GTI. Obviously, this is a driver's car, so most people probably don't care too much about, you know, this, but it is nice for longer drives, and certainly nice you have it with the manual, since some other manuals do not offer adaptive cruise. So it's really great that you have that here in this. We have a gentle corner here we're going around. I'm just kind of hovering my hands on the wheel, letting it kind of do the steering for me here. And it's really good. It doesn't ping pong. It's very confident with its steering assist. And yeah, just it's doing a really good job here so far. But yeah, I'll continue to test that here. Otherwise, you know, you have most of the safety tech is standard. I think like blind spot monitoring is now standard on these and a few other things. But you know, there are a couple other features that are, you know, reserved for the highest trim still. But overall, you know, still just a really nice highway cruiser, and, you know, all the usual safety tech you expect. One nice thing is you do have the custom mode here. So with that, you can have it so the engine is in its sportiest settings, so you get the cracks and pops, but you can still have like the soft suspension, soft steering, whatever you want. You can customize all that here with that custom mode. So it's really great you have that. And it also does seem like it does remember your mode selection between key cycles, so you don't have to always keep putting it into that mode. It will just stay in that mode. And so if you have one good mode, you have it dialed in for what you like, it'll stick with that, and you know, have it exactly the way you want it to be set up. But anyway, thanks to Volkswagen, I will have this GTI for an entire week, so I'm going to drive around all over the place, and then I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world fuel economy, as well as my thoughts on the pricing and how it compares to its competition. So I've been driving the GTI for a week now, and I really like it. It's a really nice thing to live with for the most part. I'll get into some of the little nitpicks I have here in a minute. But one thing I didn't mention earlier in the review that I really have appreciated this week is the steering. The steering is nice and quick and just perfectly weighted, and I would say outside of an Alfa Romeo, it is one of these near perfect steering setups that I really love, that are so rare. And I don't know, I just really love that. It just made a big impression on me this week. I love that. I also just love the scrappy nature of this thing, just being able to just throw it around and just being just so tossable and just so fun just to live with. Again, just the small dimensions, just everything about this vehicle is just so approachable and fun. And it just a vehicle that you love to drive every day, and you just want to drive it more and more. And by the way, the adaptive dampers are really comfortable here during my week. I mostly had it in the comfort setting as far as the adaptive dampers go, and they're really nice and soft here. And so I really do like having those adaptive dampers. I think they do make a nice difference, and sport mode does make it a little firmer. And I don't know, I'd be curious to try a non-adaptive damper GTI, but I really like having the adaptive dampers. But as far as other impressions, so one last little thing that I really loved was the stereo. This Harman Kardon stereo is fantastic. And in the past, you know, these Volkswagens have had Fender stereos that most of them were pretty crappy in my opinion. This stereo is actually impressive. It has a really impressive surround sound kind of experience to it, and it's like 480 watts, really solid stereo. And so for the first time ever in a GTI, I've been like, wow, this is an impressive stereo. So that was another really happy surprise, honestly. But one unfortunate thing here that was my biggest irk with this vehicle this week. First off, there's an annoying rattle on the passenger side. I think it was around the passenger front door area. I'm not sure why, but there's some kind of rattle. Not sure if I love the build quality in these still. I mean, again, it could just be this car, but you know, it's just one thing. These vehicles do sometimes tend to rattle, you know, Volkswagen. So didn't love that this has 5,000 miles on it and it's already rattling. The other thing though is the tech here. Now, the infotainment system I was able to live with, and I think there's a kind of a potential solution that I'll get to in a minute. But as far as the gauges, I like these digital gauges. I love how you can customize them in so many different ways. But the most annoying thing is there is this thing whenever you're using navigation, either the built-in nav or Apple Maps, supposedly, those are the only two, where it gives you pop-up navigation instructions, and it'll alert you 2 miles before your turn, and keep having that pop-up display there for 2 miles every single time you're coming up to a turn. And it blocks the entire top half of the tack whenever you have it in this view for the gauges. And so it's like, okay, well, if I'm navigating anywhere, I can't see anything from 2,500 RPMs to like 5,500 RPMs, and it's really annoying. And there was no way to figure out how to turn it off. I dug through all the infotainment system, all the menus. I even asked the humble mechanic, who's a Volkswagen tech and is a Volkswagen expert, and even he wasn't able to come up with any kind of way to get rid of that. I don't know. I guess the workaround, supposedly it doesn't happen when you use Waze or whenever you use Google Maps. So if you have one of these, hopefully you just don't like Apple Maps or the built-in nav, because that is super annoying. I don't know who put that into this vehicle and said, it'd be great if we couldn't see the tack while we're navigating somewhere. It just makes no sense. So that is one irk of mine. Obviously not a huge deal. You just use a different map software, but just kind of one of those bizarre head-scratching things. It's like, did anyone from Volkswagen drive this while navigating? If so, why did they want to block their tack? It just boggles my mind. But aside from that minor nitpick, this car is still so good. And yes, I don't love the capacitive touch buttons here, but I live with them. And to me, it's a little cumbersome. Like, for example, I'm in CarPlay, and to get out of CarPlay and go back to the actual menus, you can use one of the shortcut things down here. But if you hit the Volkswagen Home button, Sometimes it takes you straight to the Volkswagen menu. Other times it like says, oh, well, now you're in the App Connect thing, and then you're gonna go back again. So it's 2 taps just to get out of CarPlay. Just a little weird with some of that stuff, but honestly, I could live with this infotainment because the whole setup is so good. But at the same time, you know, they did improve things obviously with the Mark 8, but I think also, you know, there's a case to be made for just sticking with the Mark 7. You still have basically all this same great fun, just without you know, some of the annoying tech stuff. So, you know, it's just going to come down to, again, if you can get a good deal on, you know, whatever you're getting and stuff. But I do certainly like some of the improvements here for the Mark 8. But anyway, the last couple of things here to mention about the Mark 8 GTI here is my fuel economy and the pricing and how it compares to the competition. So as far as fuel economy goes, these are rated at 24 mpg in the city, 32 on the highway, and 27 combined. And I'm happy to report that over my 129 miles of driving now, which by the way had a little bit of highway but not much, I'm averaging 26.1 mpg. I couldn't believe it. I almost never do better than the city rating with most of my driving, and this was a pretty typical amount of driving for me. Nothing super out of the ordinary that would boost the fuel economy, honestly, but for some reason I'm getting 2 better and almost at the combined rating, even though I did not do even, you know, 45% highway driving like the EPA calculates for that average. So I don't know how I'm getting as good a fuel economy as I am, but I'm not complaining, and I'm very happy because I've been driving this vehicle, I've been enjoying it all week, getting on the gas as you saw many times, and I'm still getting good fuel economy. So I think this motor really overperforms as far as fuel economy goes, and it's going to be really economical, especially. And so the last thing that I mentioned is the pricing and how it compares to its competitors. And there, I think also there is a case to be made for a strong value here with the GTI. So these start for the base S trim at about $32,000, and they come really well equipped. They come with heated seats, a heated steering wheel. They still have touchscreen infotainment, and the cool thing is, if you really hate these capacitive touch buttons, the base stereo gives you volume and tune knobs again. And so honestly, just to cut to the chase here, I would just go for a base one. I would go for an S. You still have, you know, some nice luxury features there. You still have these awesome plaid seats. Now you lose out on a couple nice things, like you don't have keyless access anymore, so you have to dig your key out of your pocket to unlock it. You don't get a sunroof, and you don't get this awesome stereo, which I would miss, but you still get like the ambient lighting. You don't get the light bar in the front there, but I could live without that. So honestly, just for 32 grand, 100% all day, every day, this is a fantastic bargain. I think it's gonna be a much nicer place to live with than like a base WRX interior that doesn't have any of that kind of stuff. No heated seats, no heated steering wheel on those whatsoever until you go up to more expensive trims. And if you really must have, you know, like keyless access and sunroof, you can get that with the SE. Those are, you know, about 4 grand more. I'm gonna put you around, you know, 36 grand or so at that point. And at that point, it's a little less exciting from a value standpoint to me, because once you are getting up to 36 or so, not only do you have the WRX to compete with, but you also have the Elantra N. Now, admittedly, nothing this competes with is a hatchback in this price segment, so they have the market all to themselves there. If you want the hatch thing, which is really impressive, I was able to swallow up a whole sandbox I bought from Target, drop those rear seats down. It barely fit, but I mean, it fits, and it just goes to show just how versatile this little vehicle is, and I love that about it. And so if you really do want the hatch thing, I mean, I guess you could say an Integra kind of competes with this. That's going to have a lot less power, though, for, you know, actually a slight bit more money. I think those are like 36.5 with the manual. But if you don't care about the hatch thing, there's just, you know, the other sedans. You can get a Civic Si for 30 grand. That also drives really well. I had such a fun week with that, too. You get even better fuel economy in that with a smaller engine, but you also have less power. But that comes in a little bit cheaper if you're trying to save a few bucks. The WRX is also a great option. You get a little bit more horsepower in that, but a little bit less torque. So this motor honestly feels punchier, and this also feels a lot more polished than the WRX. The shifter feels a lot better in this. The engine feels a lot more polished, and you're also going to get much better fuel economy. I got terrible fuel economy in that WRX, that brand new 2.4. I think I was getting like 18 mpg or something. This is going to save you a bunch of money on gas alone, and you have a vehicle that I think feels a lot more polished than the WRX does, unfortunately. They just do such a good job with the powertrain stuff here, in my opinion, with the shifter and the engine with Volkswagen compared to the WRX's more raw, rough kind of feeling for everything, being a little rough around the edges. But the Elantra N, though, 34 grand still for one of those. You still get like heated seats in those. You don't get the heated steering wheel, so you lose out on some of the luxury features. But, I mean, that thing is a lot more fun. You get the crackles and pops all the time from an active 4-mode exhaust. You have more changes available for the adaptive dampers. It feels a little more noticeable for those changes. And you know, obviously it has more extroverted styling, so if you like flying under the radar, this is obviously going to be you know, that might be a non-starter for you. But if you're looking for the most fun driving experience at this price point, I would go for an Elantra. I just think it's the most fun. I laughed and giggled the most in the Elantra compared to all the other vehicles I'm talking about here. So, you know, and then this one, as tested, by the way, is 39 grand, and it's still 39,000, even though they gave me a $1,200 discount for not having any kind of leather or ventilated seats, but still comes out a little pricey. And so that's the one thing I don't love about these, is just the fact that they are you know, a little pricey when you get to these higher trims. It's great though, you get the 40th anniversary edition here this year, and that gives you the adaptive dampers for I think around 34 grand or so. So that's going to be a really solid value if you do want those adaptive dampers. You don't have to go for the Autobahn this year. But aside from that, you know, once you get to these more expensive ones, then I don't know, it just gets a little less exciting from a value proposition. Still a really nice, solid vehicle, but you also have to keep in mind, if you do want a fully loaded Volkswagen that's very similar mechanically, you can also get a Jetta GLI. Now, I know the GLI isn't quite as sharp, and this certainly handles better than the GLI, I will add, but you can get one of those fully loaded for like 33, 34 grand for its Autobahn trim, which has, you know, adaptive dampers as well. You can get it with a manual. Obviously, you lose on the hatchback practicality, but that is also going to be really tempting for a GTI buyer, I think, if you are trying to save some money and want the best value. I think the GLI kind of gives you a little bit of a better value with that, even though it does have a little bit less power and handling. This is definitely better handling-wise by a good margin. But if you don't need the utmost thing and you just want something Volkswagen, I think that is also something definitely worth considering. But and honestly, I'd be okay with a little less power, because this thing, I mean, it is punchy, but it really loves lighting up the tires. So much so that I think it really struggles to put the power down. It might be a little overkill, which is why I wouldn't mind a Mark 7, honestly, just sticking with a little bit less power, because you could actually deploy that power a little bit better, I think. Whereas this, I just keep getting traction control getting in my way constantly, which isn't always super fun either. I'm sure, you know, some tires that are maybe a little stickier than these would help, but these are summer tires and we're still spinning like crazy. So I mean, it just goes to show this motor might be underrated with just how badly it wants to shred these tires. But anyway, so yeah, overall, I'm really impressed with the GTI. I wholeheartedly endorse it, especially if you're going to get one that's a base model. I think they are a fantastic bargain, certainly something worth considering. And don't let the infotainment system bother you, because, you know, I got used to it just fine. I drove a tuned Mark 8 Golf R just last fall, and the owner of that vehicle said, you know, he got used to the screen just fine. It's no big deal. And then again, if you go for the base trim, you get the volume and tune knobs back, and that solves some of the problems as well. So I really think that these vehicles are kind of a little underappreciated these days because of some of the bad hype about the infotainment and stuff. I think it's a little bit unwarranted. I think these things are still so awesome, and yeah, I would happily daily drive one for sure. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts on the GTI. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Volkswagen once again for providing me with this vehicle to review for you guys today. And yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.